I realized too late that the problem wasn't that he'd found me. It was that my body had already recognized him. By the end of a 12-hour shift, the world narrowed down to 3 things: dust in my lungs, concrete under my nails, and the steady throb in my lower back that reminded me I was still alive. Barely. The construction site sat at the edge of the city where glass towers gave up and rust took over. Steel skeletons clawed at the gray sky, unfinished and honest in a way people rarely were. I liked it here. No one asked questions. No one cared where you came from, as long as you lifted what you were told to lift and didn't fall asleep standing up. I was Felix on paper. Felix with a last name that wasn't mine, and a social security number I'd never memorized out of superstition. Felix who didn't smell like an Omega was supposed to smell. Felix who kept his head down, and his hoodie up and his mouth shut. Most days that was enough. I was hauling a stack of metal beams toward the storage container, shoulders screaming, when the air changed. Not in a dramatic way. No thunder, no warning bells. Just density, like the atmosphere had decided to lean in a little closer. Curious. I froze. Every instinct in my body snapped awake, sharp and electric. My heart skipped, then slammed hard against my ribs, fast enough to hurt. The dust-coated world sharpened, sounds stretching thin, shouts from the crew, the clang of steel, the distant growl of traffic. Alpha. A strong one. My first thought was stupidly practical: don't look. My second thought came faster and louder: run. But my feet didn't move. The smell hit me a second later, dark, deep, wrong in all the ways that made my pulse stutter. Not the sharp command of dominance I'd learned to avoid. Not the sickly sweet pull that made Omegas fold. This was grounded. Heavy. Like storm air caught under iron. It didn't push. It waited. I turned despite myself. He stood near the site entrance, dressed too clean for the place, like grime knew better than to touch him. Tall, broad shoulders under a plain black jacket. His posture was relaxed in the way predators were relaxed, energy coiled, perfectly aware. His eyes found me instantly. Locked on. For half a second, the world narrowed to that look. Not hunger. Not ownership. Recognition. Something in my chest shifted, hot and unsettling. No, I told myself sharply. That's not how this works. Fear, I understood. Fear was familiar, manageable. I'd lived with it long enough to make room for it like a bad roommate. But this pull in my gut, this curious, traitorous spark of interest, was new. And I didn't like new. The alpha didn't move closer. He didn't bare teeth or flare presence, or do any of the usual garbage alphas did when they sensed an Omega outside a pack. He just watched, as if I were the anomaly. Maybe the first was Felix. Someone yelled behind me. Beam delivery. The shout broke whatever invisible thread had wrapped around my spine. Adrenaline surged, hot and bitter. I dropped the beam with a clatter and turned, forcing my legs to remember what they were good at. Running. I cut between stacks of materials, boots pounding against packed dirt, lungs burning. The smell followed. Not chasing, not fading. Just there, etched into my senses like a fingerprint. I vaulted a fence I'd jumped 100 times before, scraped my forearm, didn't slow. The city swallowed me whole in the next block. Sirens, engines, people. Noise, chaos, safety. I didn't stop until my hands were shaking and my breath came out in sharp, angry bursts. I leaned against a brick wall, head tipped back, eyes squeezed shut. Idiot, I muttered. At myself, at my body, at the part of me that had leaned toward danger instead of away from it. My heartbeat refused to calm, blood buzzing with leftover electricity. Whatever that was, whoever he wasn't normal. And neither was the fact that he'd smelled me through concrete and steel and a dozen other bodies. I pushed off the wall and disappeared into the crowd, already rewriting my routes, my habits, my life. It didn't matter. Deep down, beneath the anger and the adrenaline, I knew the truth, with cold, aching certainty. He hadn't just crossed my path. He'd found me. There's a special kind of quiet reserved for places no one plans to stay. You hear it in overnight buses where passengers cradle backpacks like lifelines and pretend not to watch each other sleep. In shelters where the lights never quite go off and privacy is a rumor. In rooms rented by the week, where the walls are thin enough to carry regrets, but not comfort. That was where I grew up. Between places, between names. My mother was an Omega without a pack, which in our world meant two things. She was dangerous, and she was disposable. She taught me early that staying invisible was safer than being loved. We changed cities the way other people changed shampoo brands. Don't stay long. Don't get attached. Don't let anyone smell you long enough to ask questions. I don't remember her scent clearly. Just warmth. Soap from public bathrooms. Rain. I was 8 when they found us. Not the monsters from bedtime warnings, but men and women with badges and soft voices, talking about care and structure and what's best for you. Packs sponsored by the system, looking to rehome unregistered Omegas. My mother stood between them and me with shaking hands and a spine made of pure defiance. She didn't survive that year. They called it an accident, a fever she couldn't afford to treat. I called it what it was, the cost of slipping through the cracks too long. I ran before they could file my name properly. I learned early how to listen too closely, how to pick out the wrong kind of footsteps, how to read the tension in a room. By 12, I could ride a bus across state lines without anyone noticing. By 15, I knew which shelters asked questions and which ones didn't. By 18, I had my first fake ID. Forgery wasn't a talent so much as a necessity. Names were easier to fake than faces, and faces were easier to change than sense. I worked under the table, borrowed social security numbers from dead men, smiled just enough to pass. Every document was a temporary skin. You grew into it, wore it until it itched, then shed it. The system didn't stop looking. There were always pamphlets, support for Omegas outside the pack system, free clinics, mandatory evaluations, translation, come quietly, or we'll make it hurt. They never understood what made me different. I didn't cycle, at least, not the way I was supposed to. No haze of heat, no chemical surrender to a biology designed to keep me small and owned. I learned to shut parts of myself down, to breathe through the tension and wait it out. I refused suppressants out of spite and avoided marking out of principle. Marks were contracts written on skin. I'd seen what they cost. If I never belonged, they couldn't take me. That became my religion. 5 years later, I ended up on the edge of the city, in a room barely large enough for a bed and a lock that worked most of the time. It smelled like bleach and old carpet and safety by obscurity. I paid in cash. I left no forwarding address. I thought I was careful. That night, as I lay fully clothed on the mattress, muscles still, tight from the run, something new pricked at the back of my senses. Not the alpha from the sight. Others, faint, weaving through the stale air like smoke under a door. Curious. Testing. I rolled onto my side, breath shallow, heart starting to pick up speed. They hadn't knocked. They were circling. And for the first time in years, invisibility didn't feel like enough. I didn't sleep. By dawn, the Chuji sense had faded, leaving my room smelling like bleach and nerves. I waited an extra hour before leaving, looping twice around the block just to be sure no one followed. Old habits die harder than fear. The abandoned parking structure sat 3 blocks east, half-collapsed concrete, chain-link fences and graffiti layered thick enough to count as history. It was where people went when they didn't want to be seen asking questions. Which was exactly why I noticed him the second I stepped inside. He stood near the center of the ground floor, hands in his jacket pockets, head tilted as if he were listening to something only he could hear. Same alpha, same impossible weight in the air. The space felt smaller around him, like the walls had decided to lean inward. I stopped short. "You stalking me?" I said, tone flat. "Or is this a coincidence thing? Because if it's the second one, your timing sucks." His gaze moved to me. Calm, assessing, not even offended. "You came here to confirm," he said. "Confirm what?" "That someone was following you." I snorted before I could stop myself. "Congratulations, you win the prize. It's anxiety. Happens when strangers smell your soul and disappear." One corner of his mouth twitched, barely. It wasn't a smile, more like an acknowledgement that I'd landed a hit. "They weren't my people," he said. But they noticed you. That's comforting. I folded my arms, keeping my distance. You planning to explain why an alpha I've never met can track me through a construction site in half a city? No. Honesty. Refreshing. Silence settled between us. Heavy, but not suffocating. I took notes anyway. He didn't crowd my space, didn't flare presence, didn't try to pull rank with biology. That unsettled me more than aggression ever had. I'm not interested in recruitment, I said, or protection, or whatever speech you rehearsed in your head. I didn't rehearse, he replied. Figures. My name's Felix, I added, because politeness was easier than fear. And before you ask, no, I don't need a pack. I know. That got my attention. Then why are you here? His eyes softened. Just a fraction. The scent of him deepened, not darker, steadier. Because you're alone, he said. And because the system hates things it can't categorize. There it is, I muttered. The prophecy. He stepped closer, not toward me, but into the space between us and the far entrance, as if placing himself in the way of something invisible. You don't mark, he said. You don't cycle. You don't submit. Wow, I said dryly. You learn all that from one sniff? Or is this your hobby? That's why they'll come, he continued, unfazed. Others already are. A ripple passed through the structure then. 2 other alphas entering from the opposite end. I felt them immediately. Curious, sharp-edged, hungry in that bureaucratic way I'd grown to despise. They noticed Cain, or seemed to. Their steps slowed. Their sense wobbled, suddenly uncertain, as if they'd hit an invisible wall. He didn't look back, didn't need to. Their confidence bled away, replaced with calculation. After a tense moment, they turned and left without a word. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Show off, I said. For the record, he replied, finally looking at me again. I don't have a pack. That's supposed to make me feel better? It should, he said. I don't own loyalty. I earn it. I searched his face for a lie and didn't find one. That's your pitch? I asked quietly. No, he said. That's the warning. About what? About what happens, he said. Voice low, steady. If someone else decides you're worth collecting, my heart thudded hard, stubborn and furious. I don't belong to anyone, I said. For the first time his gaze sharpened, not possessive, not pleased. Good, Cain said. Then this is your choice. He turned and walked away, unhurried, leaving his scent behind like a challenge. I stood there long after he was gone, pulse racing, sarcasm suddenly useless, because for the first time, someone had seen me and hadn't tried to cage me. And that terrified me more than being hunted ever had. By the 3rd block, I knew I wasn't alone. Cities have patterns. You learn them when you spend years trying to disappear inside them. The rhythm of crosswalks. The way crowds thin near subway entrances. The smell of grease and electricity underground. That afternoon the patterns bent out of shape. The scents hit me first. 3 alphas. Coordinated. Familiar in the worst way. Polished control layered over something cold and proprietary. System-backed. Old pack. The kind that still believed the hierarchy was sacred because it kept them on top. I adjusted my hoodie and kept walking. The sidewalks were crowded, but the space around me felt wrong. Like people were unconsciously giving me a wider berth. My pulse picked up, heat crawling up my spine. A tremor ran through my hands, not fear, not exactly, anger, sharp and clean. Don't react, I told myself. Reacting is permission. They followed me down the stairs into the metro, boots measured, steps synchronized. No rush, no drama. Hunters saving energy. One of them spoke just as the train roared past, wind ripping his words into my ear. Felix, we need to talk. I didn't slow down. Get in line. Your resistance won't change the outcome, another voice said pleasantly. You've been off-grid too long. It's unstable. There it was. The language of benevolence. I turned at the edge of the platform, eyes cold. Unstable for who? For the system. The first alpha answered. He smiled like he owned research grants and court protection. For you, this could be an opportunity. Guidance, proper regulation, experimentation, I shot back. His smile thinned. We prefer adaptation. Omegas like you are rare, valuable. You could reshape the hierarchy. I felt it then. The shift. Not pressure, not submission. Something in me flared. The sense around us warped, thinning where they should have sharpened. The alphas hesitated, just for a fraction of a second, expressions flickering with confusion. Their control slipped, edges fraying. I shouldn't have enjoyed it. My breath came fast and shallow. Hands clenched at my sides, nails biting into skin. Part of me wanted to lash out, not to escape, but to hurt, to break something that assumed I was a resource. The train screeched into the station, doors sliding open. Before any of us moved, the air changed. Cain stepped onto the platform like he belonged there. No rush, no announcement. His presence hit like a dropped curtain, sudden, absolute. The alphas paled, instinct screaming louder than ideology. Step away, Cain said quietly. One of them bristled. This doesn't concern you. Cain didn't raise his voice, didn't bare his teeth. He simply was, solid and immovable, a gravity well. It does now. The nearest alpha lunged. What happened next took seconds. Cain moved fast enough to blur, twisting, striking pressure points, using momentum, not strength. The man hit the tile hard, gasping. The second froze long enough for Cain to slam him back against a pillar, pinning him there with lethal efficiency. The third tried to run. He didn't make it far. Cain didn't chase. He just lifted his head slightly, scent flaring, controlled, devastating. The alpha stumbled, legs buckling, confusion and fear tangling his instincts until he dropped to his knees in surrender. Silence followed, broken only by the arriving train and my own ragged breathing. I stared at my hands, still shaking. They wanted to study you, Cain said to me, voice steady. Weaponize what you carry. I looked up, heat burning behind my eyes. And you? His gaze held mine. No claim, no order. I want you alive, he said, and free to choose. The truth settled heavy in my chest. Around us, the alphas avoided his scent, but when I breathed out, I felt it ripple again. That strange distortion. My own presence tugged at them, scrambled their certainty. I wasn't weak. I was dangerous. And for the first time since the construction site, fear took a back seat to something sharper. Resolve. Cain's idea of hiding wasn't subtle. The building rose from a strip of abandoned factories like it had simply refused to die. Brick and steel. Windows boarded on the lower floors. Light glowing higher up where no one bothered to look. The freight elevator rattled as it carried us up, cables groaning like they disapproved of secrets. This is temporary, I said, mostly to remind myself. Cain nodded. Everything is. The loft opened into a wide industrial space reclaimed into something livable. Concrete floors warmed by rugs, exposed pipes wrapped in insulation, a kitchen island welded from scrap metal and polished smooth. It wasn't cozy, but it was intentional. Every corner felt used, chosen. Movement from the far side made me tense, until people stepped into view. Easy, a voice said, hands lifted in peace. The man smiled, soft and ready. I'm Erwin Beta, medic. You probably need water. He was already holding a bottle out to me, eyes flicking to the scrape on my forearm with professional concern. I took it before I could think. Felix. Welcome to the worst sleep you'll ever have on a new mattress, Erwin said cheerfully. From the workstation near the windows, another presence leaned back in a chair. Alpha, taller than Cain? Maybe. Lean, angular, eyes alert behind rectangular glasses. Noah, he said, like he was handing over a password. Then his gaze drifted back to the mess of wires on his screen. And then there was the Omega. He perched on one of the counter stools, dark curls escaping a loose tie, expression bright with sharp amusement. Mika, he said. Before you ask. No, there's no dress code. Cain tried once. It ended badly. Cain snorted. I blinked, You let Omegas sit. Mika's grin widened. Bold of you to assume we do anything here because we let it. I caught myself smiling. That annoyed me more than the hunters had. Food appeared like magic. Simple, warm, real. Bread torn by hand. Roasted vegetables. Coffee strong enough to reset a personality. We sat around the island. No one rushing. No one posturing. This was how it happened, I realized later. Not with declarations or contracts, but with plates being passed without permission. So, Irwin said lightly. One-night guest? Something like that, I replied. I don't do long-term. No one here did, Noah muttered, not looking up. Conversation picked up slowly, then all at once. Mika teased Cain about his complete lack of social graces. Irwin argued optimism like it might fix the world if he just tried hard enough. Noah chimed in occasionally with dry, surgical commentary. I laughed. Actually laughed. It burst out of me, sharp and surprising, and for a split second the room went quiet as everyone froze, like they'd spotted a rare animal. Don't get used to it, I said quickly. It's a stress response. Of course it is, Mika said, smirking. You're among professionals. Cain watched me from across the island, unreadable. Not hovering, not claiming, just present. Later, he showed me to a spare room, clean, minimal, safe in that impersonal way people use to avoid mistakes. One night, I said again, standing in the doorway. I heard you the first time, he replied. I waited for pressure, for assurance, for a bargain. Nothing came. When the door closed behind him, the silence settled in. I sat on the edge of the bed, muscles slowly unlocking, adrenaline ebbing into exhaustion. This place smelled different. Not ownership, not command, choice. That thought should have comforted me. Instead, it made my chest ache. Because safe didn't mean permanent, and temporary shelters weren't the same as homes. I lay back, staring at the ceiling, letting myself pretend, just for one night, that I wasn't being hunted. And that was the most dangerous feeling of all. The loft didn't sleep. At night, the sounds changed. Pipes clicking softly as temperature shifted, distant traffic humming. Like a held breath, the low electrical whisper of Noah's equipment still running somewhere. I lay awake longer than I meant to, staring at the ceiling until the quiet pressed too close. My body waited. That alone was wrong. Usually, nights like this came with heat licking under my skin, tension, restlessness, the biological demand for release or submission. I had learned to ride it out, teeth clenched, breath measured. Nothing came. No cycle, no spike, just awareness. I slipped out of bed and into the hall, barefoot on cool concrete. The corridor lights were dimmed, casting long shadows. I almost collided with Cain at the far end. We both stilled. Up close, his presence hit differently at night, softer, less guarded. The scent of him, deep, steady, wrapped around me. Close enough to feel but not suffocating. I couldn't sleep, I said. Neither could I, he answered. Silence stretched. Not awkward. Full. I was acutely aware of every inch of space between us. Close enough to feel his body heat. Far enough that I still chose whether to stay. I inhaled. Slow. My own scent flickered outward before I could stop it, curling through the space like a question mark. Cain's jaw tightened. He didn't move. That was the moment I knew something had changed. His breathing had deepened, shoulders subtly tense, instincts clearly alive under his control. I could feel the way my presence tugged at him, not commanding but inviting, twisting something old and feral just under the surface. And still, nothing. No step forward, no claim, no hand at my wrist or teeth at my throat. What are you doing? I asked, voice quieter than intended. Letting you stand, he said after a beat. Unless you don't want to. I laughed, sharp and uneasy. That's new. Is it bad? It's confusing. Good. It should be. I searched myself for the familiar pull, the biological countdown that told me I was losing the right to choose. There was none. Just warmth under my skin. Just awareness. Why didn't he force it? Aren't alphas supposed to? The thought hit harder than fear. If he took control, I knew the rules. I knew how to brace, how to survive. But this space where nothing was demanded, left me exposed. You're not cycling, he said quietly. I looked up. How can you tell? Because you'd smell different, he replied. And because you're still yourself. The word settled in my chest, heavier than any weight I'd carried that day. I took a half step closer. He didn't retreat. Close enough now that I could feel his breath against my hair. Steady, but controlled. My heart hammered. My hands curled and uncurled at my sides. If I wanted you to stop, he said, voice low, you'd say it. And you'd listen? Yes. I swallowed. Something in me softened, even as another part stayed sharp and ready. The balance was intoxicating and terrifying all at once. I'm going back to bed, I said finally. Cain nodded. I'll be here, not a promise. A fact. I turned away before I could overthink it, heart racing for reasons that had nothing to do with fear. In my room, I shut the door gently and slid down against it, pressing my fingertips to my throat. No cycle, no mark, no surrender, just choice. And for the first time in my life, that felt heavier than chains. The medical room smelled like antiseptic and quiet panic. It sat behind a reinforced door at the back of the loft, small, bright, organized to the point of obsession. Cabinets labeled in Irwin's neat handwriting. Clean, metal surfaces. A bed that looked more like a promise than a threat. That should have warned me. Irwin checked my vitals without comment, efficient and gentle, while Cain leaned against the far wall, arms crossed, expression closed off in a way I hadn't seen yet. This isn't about the scrape, I said. Irwin hesitated, then glanced at Cain. Something passed between them. Old agreement, rehearsed patience. Cain pushed off the wall. He's right. It's not. I sat up straighter. Then start talking. Irwin backed away, clearly uncomfortable. I'll give you space, he murmured, and slipped out, shutting the door quietly behind him. The click of the lock landed like a challenge. Cain waited a beat too long. Out with it, I snapped. Before I decide I don't like the suspense. He didn't flinch. You don't cycle, he said. I know. You don't respond to alphas the way you should. I said I know, and you're sent. He paused, as if choosing words was harder than fighting. It destabilizes others. Omegas and alphas alike. My jaw clenched. Congratulations. You've reached the part where you explain why. Cain met my eyes. Didn't look away. It's called the zero cycle, he said. A genetic anomaly. The word slid under my skin, cold and sharp. He went on. Before the modern hierarchy, there were omegas who didn't submit chemically. They didn't go into heat the way others did. Their presence regulated packs, balanced them. Leadership formed around consent, not dominance. I laughed, short and bitter. That sounds like propaganda. It was real, he said. And it scared the system. Images rose unbidden, pamphlets, clinics, smiles with teeth. My hands balled into fists. They tried to recreate it, Cain continued. Artificially, gene selection, hormonal suppression, controlled breeding. I swallowed hard. Let me guess. It worked. Briefly, he said. Then packs collapsed. Alphas turned on each other. Omegas burned out or disappeared. The hierarchy couldn't coexist with something it couldn't control. So, they erased it, I said hoarsely. They tried, Cain replied. But some carriers slipped through. Unregistered births, off-grid families. My mother's face flickered in my mind, pale and stubborn, standing between me and people who spoke about care. I stood so fast the stool scraped loudly against the floor. You knew, I said, not a question. Cain didn't deny it. You knew, I repeated, louder now, from the construction site. From day one. I suspected, he said. I confirmed it in the subway. My chest burned. Anger surged hot and bright, sharper than fear. You didn't think to mention that I'm a walking destabilization event? My voice shook. That every time I breathe, I mess with someone's instincts. I wanted you to be safe first. I laughed again, this time ugly. No, you wanted time. His jaw tightened. Yes, the word cracked something open. I stepped back, pacing the small room, heart racing. Used, not like property, but like strategy, like a variable. I don't care that you know, I said finally. I care that you decided for me. Cain's voice was low. I've seen what happens when people like you are dragged into choices they don't understand. So, you lied. I waited. The difference felt thin and razor sharp. Fear crept in then, not of him, not of Hunters, but of what came next, of knowing there was a choice now, that I wasn't just surviving by accident. What if I don't want to be a symbol? I demanded. What if I don't want to fix your broken world? Cain took a slow breath. Then you don't. I stopped pacing, looked at him. That's it? That's it, he said. The zero cycle doesn't work without consent. It never did. The room hummed with unspent words. Anger still sat heavy in my bones, tangled with something worse, understanding. He hadn't tried to cage me. He'd tried to delay the moment when the choice became unavoidable. I sank back onto the edge of the bed, hands trembling. I hate this, I said quietly. Cain nodded once. I know. And for the first time since learning what I was, I realized the truth wasn't the heaviest part. It was the freedom that came with it. The safe house was supposed to be boring. That was the point of it. Neutral walls, recycled air, furniture chosen for durability instead of comfort. A place that didn't smell like home or hope or anything worth remembering. Somewhere you passed through on the way to surviving another day. We arrived just before dusk. 2 nights, Cain said as Irwin checked the perimeter. Then we move again. Story of my life, I muttered. Noah was already at the terminal, fingers flying over the keys. Mika leaned in the doorway, pretending to look bored while scanning reflections, shadows, corners. Something in my chest stayed tight. The smell was wrong. Not obvious. Not aggressive. Just threaded, like someone had brushed past the edges of the space and left fingerprints in the air. Familiar enough to pass casual inspection. I didn't like that I noticed. Irwin handed me a cup of tea. Drink. You're running on fumes. I took it. And that was the moment everything tilted. The room hummed, low and disorienting. My vision narrowed. The cup slipped from my fingers and shattered on the floor, steam curling up uselessly. What was in there? I snapped, trying to stay upright. Irwin froze. Too slow. Hands caught my arms from behind, precise and practiced, forcing my shoulders back. The scent hit me hard then. Sterilized calm layered over authority. System. Easy, a voice murmured near my ear. This is for your own protection. Rage exploded through me, white hot. My control slipped, and my scent surged. The men holding me swore as their grips faltered, instincts misfiring, confusion bleeding into panic. One staggered back, hands hovering, like he didn't know where his own body was anymore. Too late. Injection. Cold fire down my neck. The world lurched sideways. Through the haze, I saw Irwin shoved aside, shouting. Noah grappled with someone off-screen. Mika disappeared entirely, either running or dragged, I couldn't tell. And Cain moved like a nightmare made solid. He took one look at the men in system colors and something in him broke. There was no hesitation, no restraint. He hit the first alpha hard enough to lift him off his feet. The sound echoed, bone against concrete. Cain! I tried to shout. My legs gave out. The last thing I saw before darkness took me was his face, not furious, terrified. I drifted in and out, senses dulled but not gone. Voices carried through the fog. Confirmed carrier, 0 cycle. Priority transfer, sedation holding. For now, a hand brushed my wrist. Careful. Clinical. That scent, someone muttered. It's destabilizing. Which is why we move fast. The floor vibrated. Maybe a vehicle, maybe a door ceiling. I tried to move. Couldn't. Then, faintly, through the chemical haze, another scent cut through everything else. Blood, Cain's blood. My consciousness snapped sharp for half a second. Not dead, my instincts whispered. Fighting. Relief hit so hard it hurt. Darkness swallowed me again. Cain stood in the ruined safe house long after the last body was unconscious or fleeing. Broken furniture, blood smeared across concrete, the echo of Irwin's shaking breath as he checked the wounded. It was the same, different location, different uniforms, same lie. Protection. Cain pressed his fist into the wall, concrete cracking under the force. He had buried a pack once because he trusted the system to draw a line it never respected. He wouldn't make that mistake again. They had taken Felix, and Cain would burn every protocol, every alliance, every rule in the hierarchy to get him back. This time, he wouldn't arrive too late. I woke to metal and restraint. Cold floor beneath my back, lights too bright, humming with a frequency that set my teeth on edge. My wrists were bound, not painfully, just enough to remind me that someone had planned this carefully. Underground, the air smelled recycled, scrubbed clean of individuality. No windows, no time, just space designed to make you forget yourself. Subject is conscious, a voice said from somewhere to my left. I turned my head slowly. 3 alphas, white coats over tactical gear, like science needed protection from consequences. Their scents were tight and controlled, but fraying. Good. You shouldn't fight it, one of them said. We've adjusted for your sensitivity. I breathed in deliberately, deep, slow, and then I let go. Not violently, not recklessly. I didn't flood the room or push dominance outward. I focused instead on the way Cain's presence had felt when he chose not to move closer, on the way choice had settled into my bones like something heavy and earned. My sense shifted, not stronger, clearer. The reaction was immediate. The alpha closest to me stiffened, eyes flashing as instinct and training slammed into each other head-on. The second turned sharply toward him, teeth bared, confused aggression spilling loose. What's happening? One snapped. I smiled, breath still steady. You brought the wrong variable. They staggered as my presence threaded through the room, not commanding, not submitting, just existing, undeniable and unplaceable. Outside the complex, Cain moved like memory. Down corridors marked with old insignia and newer fear, guided by scent and something deeper, rage sharpened by restraint. The underground facility breathed secrecy, but Cain had learned long ago that secrets were just another kind of trail. 2 guards went down before they realized he wasn't a ghost. An alpha lunged at him with protocol on his lips. Cain broke his arm and kept moving. This was different from the last war. Then, he'd fought to protect a structure that deserved to fall. Now, he fought for a person who refused to be owned. The difference mattered. Back in the holding chamber, voices rose. Stand down, the lead alpha barked. This isn't regulation behavior. No, the other snarled, circling him. You're obstructing the objective. The hierarchy cracked, audible, visible. Their sense tangled, sharpening into chaos. Authority without consent devoured itself. That was the truth they'd buried. I felt it humming through my veins, electric and terrifying and right. You can stop this, one hissed at me, eyes wild. Just suppress. Let us stabilize. No, I said softly, and chose again. The room erupted, not at me, but at itself. One alpha shoved another. A third intervened, violently. Orders dissolved into dominance contests, all of it pointless without a center to anchor them. The doors blew inward. Cain filled the frame like judgment. For a moment, everything froze. My scent shifted toward him, instinct finally aligning with intent. Not pulling. Not claiming. Recognizing. He crossed the room in 3 strides, hands already at my restraints. His touch was steady, grounding. Furious only in the way a storm is furious when it clears the air. You okay? He asked. I nodded. Took you long enough. His huff was almost a laugh. Behind him, the remaining alphas backed away. Hierarchy in shambles, eyes darting. between us like they were witnessing a myth they'd been taught not to believe. Cain straightened, turning to face them. "You can leave," he said. "Or you can try." None of them tried. As we moved through the collapsing compound, alarms screaming too late, I understood something with startling clarity. My scent wasn't a weapon. It was a question. And for the first time in a system built on obedience and fear, the answer was optional. Cain pressed a hand briefly to my back. Not steering, not pushing. Just there. Old blood, soaked deeper into the ground behind us. Ahead waited something untested, unwritten. A new war had begun. This time, it wouldn't be fought over control. It would be fought over choice. We didn't stop running until the alarms were a distant echo and the city swallowed us whole. The emergency stairwell dumped us out into night air thick with rain and exhaust. I bent over, hands braced on my knees, lungs burning, not from fear, not anymore, but from the aftershock of choice made too many times in too few minutes. Cain stood a few steps away, scanning shadows, senses flared and razor sharp. Blood darkened the cuff of his sleeve. "You're hurt," I said. "Later," he replied. His voice was still in command mode, carefully contained, reinforcements ready if the world decided to break again. I straightened. "No. Now." He looked at me then, really looked, and something in his expression fractured. "The system won't let this go," Cain said. "You made that clear in there. Good. They'll keep coming." His jaw tightened. "There's one way to make that stop." I already knew what he was going to say, and my pulse kicked up anyway. "Mark me," I said flatly. "No." The refusal came fast, immediate. "I won't do it like that." Silence stretched between us, rain starting to mist the concrete. Cain stepped closer, slow and deliberate, like approaching a wild thing that had already proven it could burn the forest down. "There's a legal framework," he said. "If you're bonded, fully, publicly, it changes jurisdiction. Packs back off. The system's hands get tied. And the cost?" I asked. His eyes didn't waver. "You'd be protected." That wasn't the question. He inhaled sharply. "You'd feel me," he said. "Always. The pull would anchor you." "So would I." I held his gaze. "And if I don't want to be anchored?" Something raw crossed his face. Fear, barely leashed. "Then they'll never stop hunting you." That was the truth. Not a threat. Not a promise. My hands trembled as I flexed my fingers. All my life, marks had meant one thing. Ownership disguised as care. Structure that only worked if you stayed small inside it. I'd fought too hard to become myself to trade it away at the first offer of safety. But this wasn't the first offer. This was different. Cain didn't reach for me. He stayed exactly where he was, giving me space, even as the city pressed in around us. "Say the word," he said, "and I'll do whatever you decide." The weight of that nearly buckled me. I stepped forward instead, close enough to feel his heat, close enough that the air thickened, scents tangling, not dominating, not submitting, meeting. "No, Mark," I said. "Not like they write it." Cain's eyes darkened. "Felix, I'm not yours," I said, voice steady despite the way my heart thundered. "I'm with you." The words settled between us like a line drawn in blood and light. I didn't bare my throat. I took his hand. My scent shifted. Not flaring, not hiding. Choosing him as he was choosing me. The connection sparked, unfamiliar and terrifying and right. Cain sucked in a breath, sharp and startled, as if something ancient in him had just been rewritten. "I feel you," he said softly. "So do I," I replied. Not as a pull, as a presence. The bond formed without pressure, without pain. A thread instead of a chain. A choice renewed with every heartbeat. It didn't quiet the world, but it changed how I stood in it. Cain brushed his thumb over my knuckles, grounding. Reverent. "This won't follow any protocol." "Good," I said, exhaustion finally catching up with me. "I'm tired of other people's rules." His mouth curved, not into a smile exactly, into relief. Above us the storm broke harder, rain washing blood and secrecy into the gutters. We didn't claim each other. We chose. And for the first time since I learned what I was, the future didn't feel like a threat. It felt like something we could build. Morning found us in the kitchen. Not a dramatic sunrise or a battlefield debrief, just the quiet hum of appliances and the smell of coffee, strong enough to wake the dead. I sat at the kitchen island, wrapped in a borrowed sweatshirt that definitely wasn't mine, watching the loft stretch itself awake. Erwin moved first, hair sticking up at impossible angles, humming as he poked at a pan. "Good news," he announced. "No one died last night." "Low bar," Mika said, sliding into a chair with a mug already in hand. "But I appreciate the consistency." Noah leaned against the counter, arms crossed, eyes flicking between us like he was recalibrating hardware. "Security's compromised," he said. "We'll need new protocols." Cain opened his mouth, then closed it. I noticed. He glanced at me instead. "Suggestions?" he asked, carefully. I arched a brow. "You're asking the pack?" Mika grinned. I knew I liked him. What followed wasn't a strategy meeting so much as organized chaos. Erwin volunteered to coordinate safe medical contacts. Noah outlined a mobile tech setup designed to disappear and reappear on command. Mika offered to handle intelligence, with commentary. "I'm good at patterns," Mika said, "including the emotional kind. Don't roll your eyes, Cain. Data lies. Feelings leak." Cain didn't roll his eyes. Progress. I sipped my coffee, letting the scene settle into my bones. No orders barked. No one postured for dominance. Roles formed where skills met willingness, not obligation. Choice, again. A plate appeared in front of me. Eggs, toast, something green pretending to be healthy. I looked up to find Cain already moving away, like feeding me wasn't something he needed acknowledged. "Thank you," I said. He paused, then nodded once. Humor turned up around mid-morning. Mika discovered one of Noah's hidden backups and declared it tragically poetic. Erwin accidentally set off the kettle twice. Noah pretended not to enjoy the chaos and failed badly. Cain watched it all from the edges at first, shoulders still tight, instincts clearly braced for impact that didn't come. Eventually, he sat, not at the head of the island, beside me. It shouldn't have mattered. It did. "This is different," he said quietly. "Voice for my ears only." "Terrifying, I know," I replied. His mouth twitched. "I keep waiting for it to fall apart." "So do I admitted. "That's how you know it's real." He studied my face like he was committing me to memory all over again. Without the calculation, without the fear of losing control. Just presence. Across the room, Mika caught the look and stage whispered, "If you two get any more domestic, I'm installing a privacy screen." I snorted. Cain sighed. It was almost fond. Later, as the others drifted off to their self-chosen tasks, Cain leaned back, against the counter, exhaling like he'd been holding his breath for years. "I don't have to hold everything," he said, half to himself. "No," I replied, pocketing the moment carefully. "You just have to trust." Trust was harder than dominance, but watching him try, awkward, sincere, learning, I thought maybe that was the point. This wasn't a pack built to survive someone else's system. It was a pack built to survive itself, and somehow I was at the center of it. Not as a weakness. As a choice. The rumors spread faster than fear ever had. They slipped through underground channels and encrypted forums, between alphas, who pretended not to listen, and omegas who learned to listen too well. A pack without hierarchy. An omega no one could force into heat. An alpha who didn't rule, but stayed. Some said we'd implode. Others said it was only a matter of time before someone put us down for stability. The system hated uncertainty. That was how I knew it was working. We felt the cracks long before anything shattered. Missed checkpoints. Delayed. Enforcement. Hushed conversations in places that never used to whisper. Old rules started to wobble under the weight of a truth they couldn't rewrite fast enough. Choice couldn't be controlled without consent. Cain noticed first. He always did. But instead of tightening his grip on everything, he loosened it. Trusted Noah to reroute. Trusted Erwin to decide. Trusted Mika to read rooms better than data ever could. Trusted me to stand where I belonged, without being placed there. One evening, after a long day that felt suspiciously normal, we ended up on the roof. City lights stretched below us, restless and alive. Cain leaned against the railing, quiet in the way people get when they're finally allowed to stop bracing for impact. "You don't smell like you're running anymore," he said. I considered that. Let it sink in. "Neither do you." Below us, the city kept going. Above us, the sky didn't ask who led and who followed. Mika's voice floated up from the stairwell. "Just so you know, 3 more inquiries tonight. No threats, just curiosity," Irwin added. "One asked if they had to give anything up." I smiled. "Tell them no." Cain glanced at me. "And if they leave?" "Then they leave," I said. "That's the point." For a heartbeat, the old world bumped up against the new one. Rules grinding against something they couldn't classify. Then the moment passed. I wasn't hiding. I wasn't marked. I wasn't owned. I was standing in the open, surrounded by people who chose to be there, and who let me choose them back. That was heavier than fear, and lighter than freedom had ever felt before. When I finally went inside, the loft hummed with quiet life, soft laughter, the clink of dishes, the sound of someone existing without apology. I paused at the doorway, letting it all settle. For the first time, the pack didn't claim me. I chose it.